Hello and welcome to this edition of A Page from History. I am Nilanjan Mukhopadhyay. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar is often called the father of the Indian Constitution. Every year on his anniversary, political parties are locked in a rivalry to induct him into their pantheon of leaders. But we need to wonder if we have been able to induct Dr. Ambedkar into our National Assembly of greatest leaders. If we were to focus on any aspect of his life, there will always be some facets that gets ignored. This is the 125th birth anniversary year of Dr. Ambedkar and an apt occasion for us to take a holistic look at his personality. Dr. Ambedkar's biggest fights were with fellow Indians and not with colonial rulers. He led no satyagraha against the British and was instead member of the Viceroy's Executive Council. Despite this, no one can say that he was not a nationalist. I am joined by a very eminent panel of experts to discuss the life, role and relevance of a great Indian. My first guest on this program is Professor Sushma Yadav, a very noted political scientist, currently also the Pro-Vice Chancellor of the Indira Gandhi National Open University. I have Professor Sri Prakash, who is sitting on the Ambedkar chair of the Indian Institute of Public Administration. Welcome to the program, both of you. Professor Yadav, you used to be holding the Ambedkar chair before you became the Pro-Vice Chancellor of IGNOU. I would like to begin with to try to understand Dr. Ambedkar. You know, he always can be said to be standing apart from the other leaders that whenever we talk about the national movement. Sure. There's something unique about his entire personality, a multifaceted personality, not just a mass leader, but a great thinker. You know, to the uninitiated, how do you actually start talking about the greatness of Dr. Ambedkar?
I think it's really very difficult to put him in a canvas.
Right.
And he needs a larger than life canvas indeed.
Right.
Because what he achieved and accomplished during his lifetime was more than a lifetime indeed. And I can begin with an extraordinary student who was trying to learn, and who was trying to learn in the system where he had no place. I would put him in a place where he was extraordinary, would like to answer questions put by the teachers, but wouldn't be able to solve because he wouldn't be able to write on the board because of the touchability issue. I can visualize a child who was extraordinary, wanted to study Sanskrit, could not study Sanskrit because he was not allowed to.
Yes.
And he said, I cannot know the culture of India, the Sanskriti, without Sanskrit. And later on tried to do so. Then I find a young man who gets funded,
gets an opportunity
to go outside India and sees a different world, where he sees a different kind of life with
where
equality.
He is not given the label of being an untouchable.
No, but of course there was Indian.
Yes.
He was an Indian there.
Yes, but
and
not
that's how
stratification within
indeed.
Being Indian.
No, but that's why I say it.
Right.
Because he could also understand the pinch of the colonial man.
Right.
But he found that the pinch of colonial man was much lesser than the untouchable man.
Right.
And he could combine the two. And that's why he went there to study economics, right on the Indian finance, problem of Indian rupee, the provincial finance, but starts studying sociology and anthropology. What are castes? What are their mechanisms?
Right.
Who are Shudras? How they came to be what they were. So an economist going into sociology,
science,
anthropology, then political science, then law.
Right.
You know, all these subjects he studies. And studies in almost the best of the institutions of the world, Columbia University, Gray's Inn, London School of Economics and Political Science.
Also practices.
and practices, and when he starts practicing he finds again same kind of layers.
Right.
Since he doesn't have somebody from his family, from his clan, from his ancestors who is practicing, he can't have
In fact, when
clients.
he, in the course of his, after his return from, from America, when he comes and becomes a professor in one of the colleges in Bombay,
Yes.
his colleagues don't appreciate, or rather, they protest sharing a water jug with him.
Not only this.
So discrimination continues for a very long period
and when he
of
becomes
time.
secretary to the Maharaja of Baroda, the peon refuses to give him a glass of water.
Right.
Because that was not
Now
his.
this refusal, let me bounce off an idea with Professor Sri Prakash. We are talking about discrimination within a discriminated community.
Okay.
If we try to look at the world in which Dr. Ambedkar grew up in, the 1920s, 1930s, the time when he is actually first finding his feet, becoming clear about what he wants to do in life. First level of discrimination being Indian in a world which is dominated by colonials, with the colonial idea,
Okay.
Second is, within India, he is finding that he is also not an equal. So that, to your mind, does that at multiple levels of discrimination, does it become a basis of his mental makeup?
When we evaluate the journey of Baba Saheb Bhimrao Ambedkar, the discrimination he faced after his higher education in Baroda becomes eye-opener for him. What he felt in America or in Britain, that became least important for him. The discrimination he faced in Baroda when he became secretary, at that time it hurts him. He asked for water, water is not given to him. He asked file is thrown to him. And after a certain period, he is compelled to leave the job. He left the job. When he is about to catch the train to Bombay, unfortunately he misses his train. In evening he gets a shelter to a family. And somewhere the moral value of Dr. Ambedkar compels him to tell the truth about his own identity. And when he discloses his identity to the family, that family again discriminates him, misbehaves him. Later on, when he became professor at the Sandham College, after 3 days, when this fact became known to each and everyone in the college,
he was from
the
so-called untouchable class.
Then a student, the whole class, only few students were in the class, and they were left in the class to tell Dr. Ambedkar that you are untouchable and will not study with you, and we were here to tell you only that you were the untouchables.
Right.
So though he faced both type of discrimination, being colonial individual one, second, the discriminated by the upper caste in Indian society. But that was most pinching part to Dr. Ambedkar, because his perception was that after having such a high class of education, he will be treated at par.
Right. When we talk about discrimination, when it's talking about the discrimination which he faces, not being able to get what he really wanted, it becomes a recurring theme of his entire life. He demands rights, doesn't get it for his people. He becomes the spokesperson for his community, is not allowed to be seen as, as a spokesperson of a community, because it is presupposed within the framework, even within the framework of the national movement, that a community like that is not expected to have a spokesperson. Is that the way you would like to see his progression? Now, before we get into the final, some more
I think
details?
you put it in a very, very, I would say, extreme words. We never never used this, but this is the expression which really expresses it, because when he tries to become the spokesperson of his own communities, the depressed communities at that time, that also is taken or almost co-opted by Congress and Gandhiji. And he has to fight with his own people, he has to fight with Congress, he has to fight the Mahatma of that time, or Mahatma Gandhi as he was called, and almost a big leader of Congress.
A political giant.
A giant, of course, and he was giant at that time also. And I think with the British as well. So it was a very, I think, a very big, subtle fight that he had to take. On one side, if he doesn't speak for his own people, he is losing everything that he wants to gain for his people. And if he fights with the giant, he may fear losing everything that he has otherwise gained in the society. So I think it was a very tightrope walk which he had to do, and he did it excellently.
Right.
He fought, he argued, he advocated, and he also at times accepted the humility of withdrawal, like the Pune Pact.
Right.
He also accepted when he was when he was treated like a traitor, that no, you are not Indian, you are a British stooge, and he ultimately had to say, where is my homeland, Gandhiji, for which I fight. If I am not part of
What is going to be the country for which I really want
which
them
I really
to
want them to
want independence for?
sacrifice.
Where is my independence?
Indeed.
Right.
So I think that task, which was very complex and difficult, Dr. Ambedkar really played it
Right.
like an intelligent person, I would say.
Right. From that level of discrimination to being considered the father of the Indian Constitution, popularly known, and though the process of constitution making was a much more complex process, not really just a one man's creation, to put it on record, but nonetheless, as far as popular perception goes, as far as the general following of the people. Nonetheless, this is it's a great transition for somebody like Dr. Ambedkar. It is also a great transition for the society which discriminated against him. Yes. Do you look at it, this transformation both ways? Maturing of Dr. Ambedkar, becoming more wholesome as a statesman, and also greater amount of maturity in society to be able to accept somebody like Dr. Ambedkar to be able to be the chief of the drafting committee in the Constituent Assembly.
Before coming to this question, I would like to add something to Sushmaji's specific.
Sure.
Dr. Ambedkar, through Mook Nayak and other of his writings and activities, becomes the voice of the community at that time. But Gandhiji and Congress have been promoting N. Raja and Jagjeevan Ram in comparison to Dr. Ambedkar. In other words, Congress was not legitimizing, not giving a space to Dr. Ambedkar. That space was given to N. Raja and Jagjeevan Ramji.
Right.
As of his contribution, becoming his chairman of drafting committee is concerned, look at Nehru was not ready for it, neither Patel. Both were not ready for it. It was Gandhi who made them accept Dr. Ambedkar as a part of the drafting committee.
Right.
Later on, he became chairman of the drafting committee, and Dr. Ambedkar himself accepted this fact that I was. It was not in my dream that I will become the chairman of the drafting committee.
It's what you're basically saying is that he did not aspire for the position which finally came to him, and became his final signature as far as the modern Indian nation building is concerned. We'll take a little break at this point and then come back and resume the conversation with the two of you. Whenever we talk about Dr. Ambedkar, it is very important, as we have been talking about, to discuss the making of his persona. What was his life outside India in his youth? We talked about very briefly. But we also do forget that he was one of the most modern India's greatest economic thinkers. And how different was he from other national leaders? This has to be understood a bit more deeply. We'll be back shortly. Stay with us. Welcome back to A Page from History. This is the 125th birth anniversary year of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, and we are talking about his life and times. We are now joined in this program by Dr. N. Sukumar, with the Department of Political Science at the Delhi University. Welcome to the program, Dr. Sukumar. Sushma Yadav, we were talking about Dr. Ambedkar and one signature statement of his.
True.
I was born a Hindu, but I shall not die a Hindu. 1935, in 1956, 21 years after, the most contentious and the final signature of Dr. Ambedkar, the statement was made.
True.
First of all, the context in which a statement like this was made, and then trying to understand through this discussion that what took him more than 2 decades to finally make the transition.
I think as I told you, as a student, he really wanted to know how this culture came to be what it is, how this religion came to be what it is. He didn't really completely condemn religion or culture as such, which many could have done in his position. He tried to understand it, and then while analyzing all this, he came to the conclusion that the roots of this lie in the religion, and therefore the religion has to be changed if we have to change the position.
Right.
But not that he wanted to convert. First he wanted to change the religion, the dominant Hindu religion,
Right.
as he called it.
He wanted more rights for.
He wanted more rights, and that's
for
why
the
he
Dalits in
said,
the-
yes, that's why he said that if it is so liberal a religion, where Vasudhaiva is Kutumbakam, then where are we? Why are we not part of the whole society? Why are we put into a corner? Why are we not allowed in the houses which belong to the same Hindus? And I think that was a question
Right. Very
which
legitimate
he
question,
put
yes.
very legitimate. And I think when he wrote the address for Jatpat Todak Mandal Lahore in I think 1935, which ultimately came out as annihilation of caste.
Right.
There I think he struck at the roots of religion, that if we want to annihilate caste, because without annihilation of caste the discrimination cannot go, and if we have to annihilate the caste, it must come from the religion. And that's why he said, he did talk to lots of influential people at that time, but since he couldn't break that
Right.
grip of religion on caste,
Right.
then he said, I was born Hindu, and
Right.
he tried himself,
Right.
very, very hard, that maybe he can change.
Maybe. And
the
then finally he
minds
gave a call
of
to his people that
Hindu.
let's not try to
And even,
fight for more rights.
even there, yes, and even there, Gandhi's statement where he says that I am a Sanatani Hindu, I say that untouchability is bad, is a sin, is a crime, but Sanatan Dharma is eternal, and I believe in it, and Varnashram Vyavastha is good. I think that was the final death nail into his attempts of changing the Hindus and Hindu religion and annihilating caste from there.
Right.
So he comes to that conclusion that ultimately I will not die as Hindu.
Right. Dr. Sukumar, previously in this program we were talking about the fact that a large part of his life, Dr. Ambedkar spent in contesting other fellow Indians.
Okay.
He was not the classical freedom fighter in the way we understand the freedom fighter. One of the points which was taken up was that the Satyagraha was not his route. His protest was at a completely different level. Now, how do you link it with what we were talking about, what Sushma Yadav was talking about, wanting to break free from the caste, not being able to, and then finally saying, okay, you have not been able to give me dignity within your society, so I will move to another society. Is that the way you look at it, just analyze?
See, for him freedom is something which is the utmost core important principle.
Right.
And there was a critique on Ambedkar that why he was not being part of the mainstream national freedom movement. But he questions the entire nationalistic struggle.
Right.
That freedom for whom? What kind of freedom that we are talking about? What kind of freedom that we are, aspiring for? Do you keep your own people who suffered from this untouchability for centuries, where what about their freedom? He was questioning about the freedom as holistic, not from freedom from the colonial rulers,
Right.
but he was questioning the freedom from the Brahminical hegemony. That is the basic.
So he was not looking in
contestation.
terms of just a political freedom. He was not looking
Yeah,
at
it's also social freedom.
not
Exactly.
looking at freedom to form our own laws, but also being able to exist as human beings with dignity, with equal rights.
Freedom,
as far as
holistic. Yeah, that was his idea of freedom.
Right.
Well, I mean, in that way, where he was very much aware about what prevents the individual to not to enjoy that freedom in Indian society.
Right.
Okay, when he talks about social freedom, that where liberty, equality, and fraternity is challenged by certain cultural norms that has been imposed by the tradition, by the dominant culture. So from there he picked up his strategy to fight back with the system, and he tried to negotiate with political institutions also.
Right.
Look, if you are talking about political freedom, that you need to
Right.
address about the social freedom where Gandhi has failed. He says that caste is the internal problem of the society and we will address after getting political freedom, which even after 70 years, 65 years or 70
He
years.
definitely felt that the soft route of social reform is not going to work out.
Yeah, not going to work out. And that's why he took a very radical stand on engaging with religion, engaging with culture. And he took a very radical position where we need to deeply understood his ideas.
Right, right. Professor Sri Prakash, quite often when we talk about the development of the ideas of the struggle of Dr. Ambedkar, we say that a very landmark engagement was with his struggle in Mahar, which he led. You know, the struggle for you know, access to water. Now, to what extent somebody who's actually tracked, you know, and studied Dr. Ambedkar's life very intimately, how important was it in terms of his, you know, forming his outlook, his strategy?
Listen, I'll add three things in your question. One, he make a pledge to the Brahmin community and very categorically said that hundreds of Ambedkars may take birth and may die, but will not be able to eradicate untouchability from this society. If Brahmins take pledge for removing the untouchability from society, hardly 15 years will be enough for it. When Ambedkar was making these things public to the society, no one was coming. Society was not responding to it. The Brahminical system was not responding to it. Moreover, Gandhiji supported the Varna Vyavastha and Sanatan Dharma. As Susma ji said, that became the last nail to the coffin of deciding, quitting the Hindu Dharma and going to another Dharma. Second thing, Mahad Satyagraha, Ambedkar there is as a Satyagrahi. At Mahad, there were 4,000 Satyagrahis with Ambedkar for water, and when those Satyagrahis were attacked by upper class villagers, their number was around 500. And Ambedkar, believing in the pure Satyagraha method of Gandhi, didn't react over it. And Ambedkar category writes about it. If we would have reacted against it, then it would have been something else. Somewhere Ambedkar wanted to have a system where society resolves its problems, its evils amicably. He was not confrontationist at that time. Later on, he becomes reactionary, as Dr. Shivakumar said.
You know, Dr. Sushma Yadav, you were talking about the Pune Pact, you know, that it's a time when he does take a back step, you know, he does make a compromise. Now, if you actually try to, you know, try to understand that out there was a very rigid Mahatma Gandhi, went on fast. Dr. Ambedkar finally accepted seats kept within the, you know, the Hindu quota, not a separate electorate as was there for other religious minorities. A very important question, that in the back of his mind, could Dr. Ambedkar ever forgive Mahatma Gandhi? Or it was just a tactical step?
You know, this is a very interesting and difficult question. I don't think he would have ever forgiven him. But I think maybe if we use Gandhian language or idiom,
to use the strategy of Gandhi on him.
He did, no, but Gandhi, maybe if I use Gandhian terminology, then Gandhi made a penance by sending him to the Constituent Assembly. You know, maybe he also...
Was that to a great extent Gandhiji's decision?
Not at all, not at all, not at all. It was not a great decision, it was a very strategic decision. Please look at it like that.
And you know, it must be kept on record that Dr. Ambedkar came into
you know, it was a very strategic.
The Constituent Assembly primarily through the Bengal route.
Yes, Pune Pact signing, as I think Dr. Bakshi has written on that, Upendra Bakshi, that it was not a noble act, rather it was a very noble act by a noble soul, by Gandhi. And then Gandhi decided to send him in the Constituent Assembly, and there also I would tell you, would like to share with you, it was the most difficult work given to Dr. Ambedkar, entrusting him the work of drafting the Constitution, where he was given an onerous task of the whole Constitution making.
Being able to take everybody together without any
Indeed,
divisions.
where he couldn't really, although he tried his best, but he couldn't do only for his own people,
Right.
where he was the only spokesperson, where he was only, I think, a person who was taking their stand. And you know, at times I feel he only mothered the Constitution. In fact, he didn't father the Constitution, which he ultimately agreed also. He was given a draft. He was defending that draft with all his ability, capability, capacity, and sail it through. If you look at the language of that draft, I think there were many things he would have put, has it been his draft, but ultimately
He would have
sailed
disagreed
through.
with it, but he
He did
possibly accepted
disagree,
it because
finally, but because, as he said, and it was great on Dr. Ambedkar's part, finally he says,
so it was great magnanimity on his part to give signature to a document with which
surely,
he may
surely,
not have
which he
completely
didn't,
agreed.
yeah, completely agree. And if you were saying that he was an economist and his economic ideas hardly find place in this Constitution, and you know, you'll see the relevance, because he said that first three things which should be nationalized by the government should be industry, agriculture, and insurance. And can you
will
beat
not find
it?
very many
After
takers of
60
that.
But after
you will
60
not
years,
find very many takers of that principle even now. You know, that is
no, but they'll be going through that route finally.
right.
Now they are thinking of insurance in one way or the other. They're thinking of agriculture, because finally that will only sustain them. But look at his vision. He could see it at that time, but still couldn't incorporate in the Constitution what he thought was most
Right.
essential for
Right.
this nation.
The tactical Ambedkar, but let's also try to, Professor Sukumar, trying to understand from you. Let's try to understand what were the real differences. One, with the mainstream national movement. I am calling it mainstream national movement as represented by the Congress. Besides his differences on social issues, what were the other differences with the Congress?
No, he
Why did he have to go to Bengal, for instance, to become?
No, he was basically, he had lot of problems with Congress and also with Gandhi. That's how he came out with a very wonderful work, what Congress and Gandhi have done
Right.
to untouchables.
Right.
And since he was not able to get elected through the mainstream political parties,
Right.
so he was being accommodated through as a backdoor entry from Bengal.
Right.
That's how it
Right. And
came
that too
into-
without Congress support. If I'm
Yeah,
not
of course, yeah, that's without Congress support. So that's how he
It's
came
only
into-
much later on when probably Nehru
Exactly,
and Gandhi
exactly.
they intervene and say
So
that after partition that he has to be made member, so he gets
Ex-
a seat from Bombay.
He
But he does not ever then
He
again
was
win.
very antagonistic. That is why he was very antagonistic. That but obviously, at later stage, everyone wants Ambedkar to draft such a constitution where we in contemporary India we don't have respect to that constitution, and where I was shocking to see that there was a write-up in this recent organizer, which is an RSS mouthpiece. It's a modern Manusmriti. If Ambedkar would have been alive, he would have had a lot of contestation for that.
Well, on this particular contentious note, we'll take a little break and then come back and resume this conversation. Dr. Ambedkar was very candid in his views. He had sharp differences with Mahatma Gandhi and several others in the Congress. Most of these disagreements persisted till the end. They remain even while interpreting his legacy. But can the political group, or rather can any political group appropriate Dr. Ambedkar? Stay tuned in. This program will continue.